Hello and welcome, I am King Decree, and this is a video guide to some Duelist basics. This will be a several part series, but today we're going to be taking a look at the fundamentals. But first off, huge props to Ash with his fantastic forum post which collected and conveniently condensed a lot of the information I'm about to present, so thank you. Let's start with what a squad is. A squad is essentially your deck, including your general. Each deck has 40 cards, no more, no less. You can have 3 of every card in the game in your deck, including legendaries. It's up to you whether you want to have 13 sets of 3 or 39 different ones. There are 3 types of cards. Units, which are minions that are played on the board, spells, which are effect cards that come into play immediately, and finally artifacts. Cards that give your general a buff, like increased attack. Currently, there are no ways to interact on your opponent's turn, so no trap or secret cards. Mana is the limitation of how many cards you can play each turn. Most cards require mana to be played, and once you've exhausted that mana, you must wait until your next turn for it to fill up. In addition, each turn you get +1 mana to work with. Unused mana does not carry over, and the mana cap is set at 9. Player 1 starts the game at 2 mana, but gets to move first. Player 2 goes second, but gets 3 mana. At the start of the match, both players will draw 3 cards with the option to mulligan 1, 2, or all 3 of those cards for new ones. The replaced cards are not discarded, simply put back into the deck. Similarly, each turn you have the option to mulligan 1 card. This is very important for keeping a good hand. As a side note, unlike Hearthstone, player 2 does not get an extra card to mulligan, nor do either player draw at the beginning of their turn. Instead, each player draws 2 cards at the end of their turn. If you have 5 or 6 cards, you will only draw 1 or 0 cards respectively. When there are 0 cards left in your deck, you will start to take 1 damage per turn, increasing by 1. In other words, turn 1 with no deck is 1 damage, but turn 3 is 3 damage, and so on. In all my games, I've never even come close to fatiguing, so it's probably something you don't have to worry too much about. Assuming you have the mana, you can play any number of cards. First up are units, or minions. Most cards must be played within 1 tile of another unit of yours. Most units cannot move or attack upon being played. If your unit is unexhausted, or in other words, able to take a turn, most can only move up to 2 squares and attack an opposing unit if desired. Be careful though, if you attack first, you cannot move after. Keep that in mind. Also of note is your general. For the most part, they also follow these rules. They can only move up to 2 tiles and attack a single nearby target. There are many exceptions to the above rules, which I will explain further at another time. For the most part, however, these rules do reign true. Spells are pretty straightforward. Upon using a spell, it will take effect immediately, like doing damage or buffing a unit. Artifacts are similar to spells, in that they take effect immediately, but are not spells. Spells and artifacts are of a different class and will affect and be affected by differently. Artifacts typically give your general, and only your general, a buff like increased damage or being able to attack from range. Every artifact has 3 points of durability. When you take an instance of damage, you will lose 1 point. Notice I said every instance. If your artifact has 3 points of durability, but your general takes 10 damage, you will still only lose 1 point. If you stack artifacts, both will lose a point of durability upon taking damage, so be careful about that. Almost every unit in the game can attack an opposing unit. Every unit has attack and health. Needless to say, upon attacking, your attack power will subtract from the opposing health. When health is 0, the unit will die. However, regardless of whether or not the unit dies, the attacker will still be counterattacked if able. In other words, if I take my 1-1 attacker and attack another 1-1, both of them will die. There are exceptions, like ranged units, but I will cover that later. There is a discard pile, but you cannot see it, but very few cards interact with it anyway. All maps are played on a 9x5 grid with no obstructions or unique tile placements. On the grid itself are a few mana crystals which can be walked on top of, or a unit placed on top of, for an additional mana to use, but only for that turn. Control over these mana crystals is an important board control tactic. More often than not, even if you can't use them, you should go ahead and walk over them to prevent your enemy from taking them instead. Every unit in the game, when placed on the grid, has a direction facing. Player 1 starts on the left side and faces right. Conversely, player 2 starts on the right side and faces left. For the most part, you don't have to worry too much about this. Very few cards interact with this mechanic, notably Songhai's Backstab. If you get a bit lost in all the units and effects and the like, you can see which way a unit is facing by the arrow underneath their sprite. This will also help to tell you if a unit is yours or not. When your general's health, initially set to 25, hits 0, the game is over and you lose. And lastly, for today's guide, there are, so far, 6 factions equipped with their own set of cards like unit spells and artifacts. In addition, everybody has access to a large pool of neutral minions. As mentioned before, there are some exceptions to a lot of these rules. For the most part, however, this is all you need to know to get started. Now, this is pretty basic, but in the future, I will be getting much more in depth. For example, in the next guide in this series, I will be going over specific terms like Lionar's Zeal and Songhai's Backstab. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more guides, follow me on Twitch to catch me streaming, and thanks for watching.